I'm going to start things off a little differently this time. I'm going to start us off with a question about time. I get a question from a Q&A on TikTok. I need to put it on more social medias, but that doesn't matter right now. Okay. The question is from Nevin on TikTok. He says, "What is the best baseball team in your opinion?" Well, the interesting thing about this is that baseball season is just around the corner, which is something to get excited about, especially for me since my Rangers won the World Series last year. I'm very excited for this baseball season. So, in today's episode, we're going to dedicate this to the major leagues. What we're doing in today's episode is we're going to be looking at the 12 Major League Baseball teams that I think are going to the postseason come October, November. And I'm not going to say who I think is going to win the World Series because that's too early to tell. What I will say is who I think is going to be making it in, their records, and where they're going to be seated. I'm excited for this one. It's the first Major League Baseball video since my vlog last year. So get hyped, get excited, because I'm Aaron, and this is the Game Day Hour. We're talking about the major leagues. So the way I'm going to be doing this is I'm going to start with the National League and then I'm going to end off with the American League, going from 6 to 1 because I believe this year's playoffs is going to have 6 teams like last year's playoffs. And the way it works is that the top 3 seeds are determined by the winner of each division. There's 3 divisions per conference. So we're going to look at the top 3 and then the rest is based on record. That should be simple. So let's get started. By the way, Nevin, you'll see who my favorite best team in the league will be at the end. Let's get started. So, number 6, with a record of 86 and 76, I'm actually going to give to the Miami Marlins. I know it seems weird, but you had a player last year for Miami who averaged close to 400 batting average, and you just recently got Tim Anderson from the White Sox. I think they bolstered up their lineup pretty good. It's still not a great lineup. I don't know. I'm not moved by this team. I just think this team has made enough moves, or at least a good significant move to at least get to the number 6 spot, but that's still a very low record. So I'm not too worried about what's going on with the Marlins. So they're number 6, but it's one where it was kind of like a toss up between a few teams. The number 5 team on my list actually went to the World Series last year. That is the Arizona Diamondbacks with a record of 92 and 70. Yeah, that's going to be, it's one of those records where it's hot and cold season where there's a lot of great teams and a lot of bad teams, not too many in between teams. You'll see what I mean. The Diamondbacks, I think, are going 92 and 70. Obviously, last year they played in the World Series against my Rangers. They were pretty impressive. Even though they lost 4 to 1, I was impressed for the most part with what I saw. I mean, they have some consistent hitters and they have some pretty good pitching. I think they have retained a majority of their lineup, so I am impressed with what they got. I don't know if they'll make a deep postseason run. I don't think they're that impressive in the regular season either, but I think they'll do enough to make the postseason. So number 5 is a good spot to have them. I mean, they were number 6 and they made the World Series. So number 5, it's a little bit of a step up year. At number 4, with an impressive record of 98 and 64, I'm giving it to the Philadelphia Phillies. Now, the Phillies are just straight up strong, and they were close to making the World Series last year. They made the World Series the year prior, led by Bryce Harper. This team is stacked, and they would be a top 3 team if it wasn't for the fact that the Braves exist. If the Braves didn't exist, we wouldn't be having problems with where the Phillies are. But because of that, I have to say that the Philadelphia Phillies being at number 4 makes sense to me. And with that said, they are going to host a playoff game, which they would host the Diamondbacks. That'd be a fun series. But 90 and 64, I think, is extremely reasonable for the Phillies if they can stay healthy. If they stay healthy, man, that team is tough. They're a tough team to beat. A lot of great hitters and some pretty good pitching as well. Even though they have a record less than the Diamondbacks and the Phillies, because they won their division, number 3 to me is going to be the Chicago Cubs at 91 and 71. They kept Bellinger and they're getting better. They were in the hunt last time, but I think that the Cubs are going to be the best in the division. It's still going to be a tough division, or it's still going to be tough for them in the playoffs, even though they would host the Marlins, which I think that if they were to host the Marlins, they would actually be really, really good and win that series. But with that said, I think the Cubs retained a lot of their lineup. I think their lineup is pretty young, and I kind of like where they're going at the moment. And they recently just acquired the Milwaukee Brewers manager. That's also a big move. So I think that the Cubs, yeah, number three is a good spot because the top two are just straight up loaded, and you'll see what I mean in just a second. Number two, with a record of 104 and 58, is a team that is consistently at the top, the Atlanta Braves, led by Ronald Acuna, one of my favorite players in the league. The Braves are stacked, young, and I'm impressed with everything I see from Atlanta. I say 104 because we already know who the number one team is going to be just based off lineups alone. So I don't have to worry about that. But they're a very consistent team and they're a World Series threat. While they have the lineup they have, they will definitely be a threat for the World Series. They just need to get over the hump against the Phillies and others. If they can do that, the World Series could be theirs. I'm still not saying they're the best team, but got to give it to them. The Braves are tough. But we know who number one is. Number one with a record of 113 and 49. Yeah, that's what I'm predicting. That is going to be an incredible record if they can hit it, and I think they can, is undoubtedly the Los Angeles Dodgers. They made two incredible free agency moves with Yamata as one of their pitchers. I don't know if I said his name right, but you know who I mean. And of course, Showtime. Shohei Ohtani. Ohtani is one of my favorite players in the league. To mix with Mookie Betts, to also mix with Freddie Freeman, and on the pitching side, you retain Clayton Kershaw. I mean, the Dodgers are loaded. They got young players coming up. This is a team that should go 113. I even think they should go better than that. But when it comes to the postseason, I'm going to have to put pause on that because that's something we're going to have to see. We haven't seen Ohtani in the postseason. I think that if the postseason comes around, he's going to be incredible, but I don't know how much to expect from them ever since Corey Seager left. The Dodgers have great records, but then they do nothing in the postseason, so it's whatever. Now we're going to be switching over to the American League, and this one's going to be fun. Coming in at the number six spot with a record of 89 and 73, there was a few toss ups. One of the teams I was thinking to add was the Orioles and the Blue Jays, but I'm actually going to go with the Seattle Mariners. Now, I'm a big Julio Rodriguez fan, and maybe I'm leaning too hard on players, but Seattle was in the hunt for a while last year, and I just think that with that year under their belt, this next season, I feel like they are just only ready to improve. And they're in a tough conference. I mean, while I see nothing happening from the A's and the Angels, obviously the Astros and the world champion Rangers are going to be tough competitions for them. But you have to give it to the Mariners. Their team is young and talented, and Julio Rodriguez is going to be electrifying this year. So I have to give the Mariners the nod at the number six spot. At the number five spot, it was a little interesting. I decided to go with the Houston Astros. Now, the Astros have been to the uh, ALCS, I think 7 years in a row, 6 years in a row. Either way, they're undoubtedly right now the Kansas City Chiefs of the baseball world. But I have to say I'm going to give them a step back because their team is getting older. They still have a lot of talent, but 765 that's still tough. That's still tough to beat. They got to give it to them. I mean, the Astros are still going to make some noise in the playoffs. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens, but I got to trust Houston here to be the number five seed. I would put them higher than the Rangers, but I just feel like the Rangers kept their core intact and their core is still very young and they're still coming off that World Series. So I have to give the Astros the number five spot, but don't get it twisted. I'm not like not pushing the Astros down. The Astros are still extremely tough. They're just getting a little older. Coming in at the number four spot with a record of 162 losses, you got to give it to the Tampa Bay Rays. I mean, the Rays are consistent for the last 5 years. They're a really good team, and while I don't think they have anybody that just like screams wow to me, I mean, a few guys. Rosarena is one of them. But the Rays, for the most part, they're consistent. Problem is, they're in a very loaded division. And even for that, they're still the number two seed in their division. So I'm happy to see the Rays, and I hope to go catch a few Rays games this year since I'm going to be in Tampa for the majority of the year. I hope to go catch a game at Trop, but if I don't, that's fine. Hopefully the Rays do make it to postseason. It's actually fun when they're in the postseason. I don't know why, but when they're in the postseason, I like to watch them a lot. Yeah. Coming in at the number three spot, and this one was a little tough. I decided to give the nod to the Cleveland Guardians, going 84 and 78. That's a very low record. The thing about that division is, the White Sox are not doing anything. You know that the Royals are not doing anything, and the Tigers, what are they going to do? Neither of those teams move me, and the only other team in that division that moves me is the Twins, who I'm pretty sure went last year. I have to give the nod to the Guardians. This was kind of a coin toss. Really, it's either the Guardians or the Twins that generally make it to the playoffs now. I'm not seeing any other team from that division make it for the last few years. So, coin toss, I gave it to the Guardians. I think that they have a nice roster going into this season, and they'll be tough, and they'll just barely get over the Twins to make the number three seed, but they're not going to make a lot of noise in the postseason. Since when do they ever do? Since 2016, when they were the Cleveland Indians, and they lost to the Cubs. Coming in at the number two spot is the defending world champion Texas Rangers at 99 and 63. This is not a team that moves me in the regular season. I do think they'll do better. Bruce Bochy is going to get this team ready to go. I'm very excited to see Seager, Samian, excited to see Garcia back after injury. I'm excited to see a lot of this team. Evan Carter, and then we got this new guy, Langford. Of course, I would know a lot more about the Rangers than any other team. But I don't think they make the number one seed. I do think that the number one seed is already reserved, in my opinion. But number two seed's still strong. They get a bye. I kind of wish I put them lower, hope that the Astros jump because I like playing on the road in the playoffs. For some reason, that's more comforting than playing at home. But with that said, the number one seed is the Bronx Bombers themselves, the New York Yankees, at 106 and 56. With that said, to answer your question at the beginning of the episode, I believe the Dodgers, by record, are the best team in baseball by roster as well. I think they'll have the best record. I don't know if they're going to win the World Series, but that's who I think right now is the best team. But the Yankees are extremely close to being that team. I mean, they just recently got Juan Soto to mix with Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton. The only thing that's going to set them back a little bit is Garrett Cole, not being in the pitching rotation early on, but he should get better. And by the time he's back, the Yankees are going to be rolling. I'm interested to see this lineup on opening day. Obviously, I'm going to be watching the Rangers, but I'm pretty sure the Yankees play early. And if they play early, I'm going to watch them. But yeah, this is the team who I think is going to go number one. It doesn't really matter, though, to me. Home field advantage is interesting. I'm not moved by it because of the Rangers. Or maybe I just haven't been moved by it in the last 5 years. When COVID happened, there was no such thing as home field advantage, and I just kind of forgot about it. But yeah, the Yankees are number one, and the Dodgers are number one. Dodgers get the nod with the best record. That's who I think the best team is going to be. Before we go, I do have one more question to answer. This is kind of like a little bit of a silly question, but let me humor it for a second. It's from Devi on TikTok, and she says, do you think the Las Vegas Raiders will ever go undefeated? Now, I don't know why the Raiders specifically, but let me hit you with the history of the NFL since the Super Bowl era. There's only ever been two teams to go undefeated in the regular season: the Dolphins back in the 70s and the New England Patriots in 2007. Only one of those teams have ever won a Super Bowl. Now, if you look at the history of the Raiders have had some incredible teams. They're a three-time Super Bowl champion team. They've had incredible players on the rosters. They've been to multiple Super Bowls. But with already how limited the undefeated spot is and what their roster is right now, they just recently released Jimmy Garoppolo. Before I started doing this recording, I saw it on YouTube. They did make some good moves on defense. I should talk about free agents. I think I'll do that on TikTok because I already know my next episode's coming out, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But to answer your question, no. I don't see the Raiders ever going undefeated. I don't see a lot of teams going undefeated. So there's that. So yeah, that'll do it for today's episode. In recap, from 6-1 NL to AL, I got the Marlins at 6. I have the Diamondbacks at 5, the Phillies at 4, the Cubs at 3, the Braves at 2, and the Dodgers at 1. In the AL, I have the Mariners at 6, the Astros at 5, the Rays at 4, the Guardians at 3, the Rangers at 2, and the Yankees at 1. Those are my playoff predictions. Comment down below who you think is making the playoffs and also who your favorite team is. I think that's going to be something that's very fun. But yeah, that'll do it for today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. If you do, please leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe. Leave questions down below here at YouTube, TikTok, or any of my social medias. They'll all be in the description below, so go check that out. Here's an interesting thing I want you to ask. I want to actually answer some top 5 type questions. So if you have any questions that can be put in top 5 form, I'll be happy to answer it. It doesn't have to be sports related. Remember, it can be anything. Just don't make something controversial like politics. That's all I ask. Anyways, that'll do it for me. So I hope you guys have a great day. Take care, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.